Well, we just talked about jet fuel. So why don't we talk about actual jets? Tim flagging a note from Hunter K. of Wolf Research this morning that he found interesting. Let's bring Hunter in to talk about it. And Hunter, welcome. It's not your note is buy this and sell that, although you've got ratings, underperform, outperform, peer perform, whatever. It's more about this loan, this grant program that is part of sort of the bailout of the airlines, the fight over pay rates and dilution of shareholders. In a very basic way, what's the conclusion for our audience? Are some airlines more investable than others because of what's happening behind the scenes?
Yeah. Good afternoon, by the way. How are you guys? I would say that's always the case. But in terms of what's going on here with the government, the word bailout's been thrown around a lot, but it's not really a bailout because there's going to be a price for this. And the real debate here that people are trying to understand, both in and out of the industry, is what the Treasury wants from the airlines in exchange for this $25 billion for passenger airlines, because the law was passed with some ambiguous language in there around appropriate compensation. And right now it seems to be that Secretary Mnuchin is the sole decider, maybe in consult with some of his other Trump's cabinet members, about what that means. That could be warrants, it could be notes, it could be stock options, it could be an equity position. No one really knows at this point, and I think currently negotiating with Treasury right now.
Yeah, so the idea being, I guess, Hunter, that you take a certain amount of executive pay or a certain amount of grants, but a lot of these market caps have been wiped out. I mean, Delta's held up pretty well, as your notes. American Airlines has been hit, so they're going to have all these. If they take the same amount of money, they're going to have wildly different levels of dilution based on the remaining size of these airlines. How does that impact how we should think about investing in airlines? And you may not go there, but I'm going to ask you, which airline stocks won't exist in 6 months or a year?
Yeah, no, sure, that's a fair question. I think in terms of the dilution, I mean, that's what's being debated. So, for example, in our note, we talked about Delta and American both take $5 billion. The number might be plus or minus a couple hundred million or maybe even $1 billion. That's not the point. If they both take $5 billion, well, look, American's got a $5 billion market cap. Delta's got an $18 billion market cap. It wouldn't be fair to just dilute them both by 15%. But also, in the same note, if you want to dilute them by the amount of the grant of $5 billion, you're telling me that American CEO is supposed to go back to his board, to shareholders, and propose that a 100% dilutive event or 93% dilutive event, whatever the math is somehow good for them? The answer is no, that's not right. So that's not what it's going to be. That's an unrealistic scenario. And at this point, it's about whether or not Mnuchin is willing to sort of say, hey, it's still a fair deal for me because there's a tax angle attached to this, or I can only get paid, say, $900 million on a $5 billion grant. He's got to take that back to his Republican base and say that that's a fair deal. And that's where things get real hairy. In terms of, which airlines exist in 6 months or now, I mean, look, a lot of it depends on the recovery. I think the cash that they get, they're going to burn through it in about 4 months. The level of cash burn is going to increase for every airline in April. And there's some airlines that might not make it through. If this thing prolongs into next year, yeah, there's definitely going to be some airlines that don't make it through.
Hunter, it's Karen. Let me ask you a question. Do each airline, do they have to take the same kind of deal? Could Delta take a senior debt deal and American take an equity deal that would be more dilutive for them? Or does it have to be the same structure for everyone?
All we know is that it's appropriate compensation. We don't know if the deal is going to be the same. I do believe that airlines are being represented by a single entity. I think they're in general consensus as to what the compensation should look like. I think the level of dilution is going to be different. I don't think the instruments are going to be different. They may, but I think if the terms are too onerous or the airlines feel the dilution is too heavy or whatever, their hands are too tied, they're going to probably reject it and walk away from it. So you may see a divide occur between the airlines, who I think appear at this point to be pretty aligned. But when the devil's in the details, like they say with these types of things, and if the dilution is too much or they don't like the instruments, they're going to, one or two of them may walk.
Hey, Hunter, before we let you go, I want to ask you one question based on what you previously said. Is it theoretically possible for some airlines to take a few $1 billion in taxpayer money and then still go bust?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, this is a temporary solution. The government made available $25 billion in grants. and they have another $25 billion in loan guarantees above and beyond that. American has already said they're going to take $12 billion from the government, or they may, I suppose they said. That's $6 billion in grants, roughly another $6 billion of loans. And I think that can probably get them through the end of the year. But if demand does not recover by 21, American will probably have burned through that cash, and they're going to be in a difficult position. So, and they're not the only ones, by the way. It's just they're the ones that said $12 billion. So they need demand to recover. You can't survive with 75% revenue down, as we have in our models for the second quarter, probably down 50 some odd percent after that in the third quarter. You just can't survive. The level of cash burn is too deep.